Hello and welcome back to another episode of Activist. I'm Gareth.
And I'm Jackie.
In today's episode, we have the brilliant Justin Reineke from Steinbeck Animal Save.
For years, Justin worked in the pig farming industry and knows everything that went on the day-to-day running of the operation. Today, however, he speaks out against the very industry he was once a part of.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a like, leave a comment below of something you've learned from it. We really hope you enjoy this one. It goes very in-depth about it, and it's just another brilliant speaker. Join us with Justin.
Welcome, Justin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And for those who haven't heard your amazing story yet and your transformation, could you please tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, so basically, I don't know, I was involved in some farming when I was a youth. So when I was a youth, I kind of was troubled. I kind of got into some trouble and stuff, dropped out of high school, kind of was going down the wrong path, and ended up without a high school education, there's not a lot you can do that can pay a reasonable wage. So it's like, you can pump gas, but that's minimum wage, and I needed a little more than that. So my aunt hooked me up with a farming, and then I did farming for till 2009 when I met my dad. And I was kind of on that search of trying to meet my dad because, being a youth, not growing up with a father figure, it's something you always want to find out more about. And my wife and my family's, my mom's sister helped find out the information for me from my mom, and I was able to get his name, and he was a bricklayer. And I first day I met him, it was kind of a shocker, right? And then basically I just ended up asking him within 2 weeks of meeting him, would you ever hire me? Because I really want to get out of farming, because he owned a company, right? So I knew my chances were, it was summertime, it was pretty good to get a job. And I got right into bricklaying, and I never looked back, and I really loved it because it was hard work, which farming I could relate to, right? You're always moving, you're always busy. Same with bricklaying, you're always busy, you're always moving. And that's why so it kept me busy, and I really enjoyed it, and it paid a lot more too. So as soon as I got that first paycheck, I was like, oh, wow. I don't know why I didn't get into construction sooner, but I did. I was just graduating too. I got my mature student. So I was trying to better myself too, and kind of get out of farming, because I knew what I was in and how I didn't like it. And so I did that. And then I had, my grandpa had cancer in 2017. And so I was going through that, and I was the only family member going through it with him. And he survived that and had the operation and had cancer taken out. And then I had a car accident 2 months later, and that car accident changed my life forever. I was going to work, and a lady took us out on a highway, and I woke up in a field, and all of our lives that were changed ever since from that day. And it was a really bad car accident, and everybody survived. We all have injuries that we've got to live with now. And then a month later, I watched What's the Health? I had it recommended to me. And that movie, I could relate to it so much with being a farmer, and especially a Manitoba farmer. I could see North Carolina in Manitoba, how we have farms all around our small communities and rural areas. And that's just identical to, what they were showing in the movie, how they're spraying the field on, a mile road behind you. And that's just basically exactly how it is. And, the smell of the farm is basically surrounded by your town. The wind's blowing the wrong way. That's all you can smell. And that's exactly how it is in all the communities I've lived in since I was 17. And so I was just like, why are we doing this? And, seeing everybody, I know the movie was kind of vegan bias, but with being a farmer, I could see it and know that, if you're telling me I don't need to consume animals and I can do it, then why not? So I did my research and I figured it out. And then I found two prominent, vegan activists in 2017, James Aspey and Joey Carmstrong. Those were the two that kind of really got me really thinking, especially James because of health, and Joey because of his troubled past and going vegan and how it helps him be more peaceful and stuff like that, and just try to be a better person, right? So I could relate to both sides of those, with my grandpa having cancer and me having a troubled youth and dealing with basically all the same things as Joey. I did a year of house arrest, and so I can relate to being told not to be able to leave and not being able to do anything. And So yeah, it was just like a no-brainer, and that kind of pushed me into sharing my story, because it was such a good, like, not just a good story, but it was just my story, and I wanted to share it with people because it helped me deal with what I went through, because all of it, not just the farming, but all of it, like, is entailed in all big ones, one event in my life that, forever changed me.
That's an amazing story. Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So you grew up in the generation of, the got milk and stuff. And when you were still a teenager, that's when, got given the opportunity to be part of the meat industry to help feed your country, So
you got it.
Yeah. So when you got offered the job, to get into it, did you have any sort of idea what it was really going to entail? Or was it just, go work on the happy farm?
Yeah, not really. I didn't have an idea at the start. I started off with washing barns. So it was just washing the manure in the farrowing room. So I wasn't really with the animals and dealing with them. So like, that wasn't too bad. You're paying me a decent wage to stand there with a pressure washer for, 6 hours a day. I was like, okay. And then what happened was they closed that barn down and they sold it and offered me a position at a barn closer to where I grew up. And that barn was the boar stud. So that barn, they told me what it was, but I really didn't know what it was. Like, it's a boar stud. What's that, right? I didn't really think very much of what it was, right? And and the incentive for that was a little bit more money than I was making before, and being 17 and getting a salary job where you just have to show up and you get paid, and if you work less, you still get paid, and you never really had to work more. So, I mean, for me, it was a money thing. And, being a youth, you kind of got to do what you got to do. I wasn't living with parents, right? I was living on my own since 16 and a half. That's when I started living with my aunt. And then when I was 17 and we got my first apartment where they co-signed it for me, so I could move. And then I was on my own. So I needed that wage to, pay my bills. So yeah, that really, got me in it.
Yeah. So, and it was a bit of an eye opener, wasn't it? I mean, we were listening to yeah, we were listening to a fantastic interview that you did with the girls at Animal Voices Vancouver. A fantastic podcast. So for anybody that really wants to know the nitty gritty of what Justin did and what goes on in a boar stud and in a factory farm, we will provide the link to it, because it's just such a fantastic interview. I don't think that we could really improve on anything that you said in that interview, which is absolutely perfect. So we'll put the link to there. And so it really made enlightening listening. So as you got more involved in the day-to-day tasks of running the operation, some of the procedures that you did speak about in that interview, such as harvesting semen and, simulating pig sex, for want of a better expression, it sounds really quite bizarre to those outside of the animal ag industry. So, there you were at 17 and, when you're not working, presumably, socializing with friends. And what did you say to people who asked what you did for a living? Like, was it simply a case of just stating your job title and, I'm working at a boar stud, and just leaving it at that?
So the boar stud kind of gave us a fun title. We were called gene transfer technicians. That was kind of the name they gave us here in Canada, and that's what it was labeled as, like when we were filling out our income tax and stuff like that. So with that, it was kind of a funny one to tell people, honestly, because you'd tell people that and they'd look at you funny, and then I would say I was working with pigs. I was pig farming, and so they didn't really think too much about it. But I mean, I met my wife when I was doing that job exactly, right? So I mean, it's something that people don't really, I guess, figure out what it's about, and even she didn't even want to hear about it sometimes, right? Like, because it's so graphic, right? I mean, honestly, it is, and it's just like, and even me, it would upset me sometimes doing some of the jobs.
Yeah, fair enough.
We have a similar thing out here with the dairy industry, and they have the technicians which do the insemination, stuff like that, and they always give you that nice big title, that I can wear that with a badge of pride, instead of saying, I did this to an animal today.
Yeah,
and,
I sunk my arm in up to the shoulder,
When you're partying with friends, what do? A gene transfer technician. Oh, you work in a lab?
yeah, that'll do. That's fine.
Yeah, that'll do, right? You leave it at that, whatever, right? I mean, but you know, when you were doing the other jobs as a breeder or a farrower, it was kind of hard to, there's no fancy name for that, right? I mean, you're breeding animals or you're giving birth to animals. There's no funny way to powder coat those ones. So those ones are a little bit more of just farming, like, but I mean, either way, people never really want to hear about where their meat comes from. That's one surprising thing. Even I lost more friends going vegan than I would have ever believed just because I'm not consuming animals. They're like, oh, I don't want to hear about it. And it's just weird because it's just amazing how so many people don't want to hear about where their food comes, even though they know. And, you know, in Canada too, we do lots of hunting. And I grew up as a Boy Scout. You know, I went hunting, fishing, did all that stuff, right? So, I mean, like, I was always under the impression we needed to do it too. But I mean, when you see all these athletes surviving and thriving and like beating records on vegan diets, like, you can't argue it anymore. I mean, everybody's searching for that next edge. Then, you know, why not give it a try? And then, you know, if you just get past that stereotype of the word, because I feel like that's part of the problem too. Sometimes people just label vegans as all as one thing, right? But, you know, I mean, everybody's got their story. And then, you know, especially with me being a farmer, right? I mean, it's got a next level to it, right? When you can actually describe what you're doing, where your food comes from, it can really make people think about it, right? And I think sometimes that's why they really just want to disconnect from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there like one thing in particular that, you know, when you describe it to them, that would be like the instant turn off, like one thing that you really dislike doing the most and just, yeah, completely threw them off?
Gruesome things, I guess, like farrowing area, there's lots of like afterbirth and gross stuff like that. So I mean, people don't want to hear about that kind of stuff. And I guess the castrating pigs too, nobody wants to really hear about those details, right? Because it is, for guys, it's, I don't know, I hated doing it every time. I mean, I did thousands of them and I still every time was thinking about that as being me, like, you know, what if that was me and I'm still doing it to these animals? So it's yeah, I mean, so people just, you know, they just right away don't even want to hear about it, right?
Fair enough. I mean, we were talking about it, weren't we, when we were coming up with some questions for you, you know, like when you've got an office job or an everyday job, like people don't talk about, you know, to their friends or their peers, you know, how many emails I sent today or how many phone calls I took, how many documents I filed or how long they spent scrolling on Facebook, you know. And, you know, it doesn't seem to matter what job you have. We don't really talk about that kind of thing in details. And, you know, do you think that that's one of the reasons that the general public don't know so much of the shocking details that do go on in animal agriculture? Because, you know, as a rule, we just don't talk about in detail about what we do.
I think that is part of it. I mean, no, there's not a lot of people that want to go home and then talk about their work some more. Especially jobs that are kind of gruesome and stuff like that. Even office jobs, right? Those are boring. I mean, what's there to tell about your filing paperwork all day, right? Yeah, so I think that's part of it. And then it's just the disconnect too, right? People don't often want to hear about how your day was. Not everybody enjoys there's going to be something doesn't, you always have something that wasn't good during your day and you don't really want to talk about it anyways and relive it. So I think that's why people disconnect and go home and they're just like, turn it off, you know, have a glass of wine, have a beer or whatever they do, right? Or even, you know, people in smoking cigarettes, right? So kind of barn workers were always puffing cigarettes, like, like, oh, I hate my job. I mean, I had asthma, so I couldn't do that. But I mean, that's people don't often want to talk about their job when they don't like it.
Yeah, for sure.
And too, on that too, I mean, that's why I think when we do activism, when we can show screens and we can make people see it, I think that's why it's so powerful with Anonymous or Voiceless and doing the screens and stuff like that, because it can really, really confronts people instead of just like having to be told about it. They can see it, and then, you know, when those people stop and they want to conversate on it, I think that's what's so powerful about doing that with TV screens and just showing people directly in the public's eye what's going on. I think that's what's so powerful about doing that, because you really confront them and they can't run away from the story when they can see it. And if you have knowledgeable people that can talk about what's going on, like that's always been, for me, I mean, when I can describe what's going on and say, yeah, that happens right here. I mean, I did this, you know, and like, you know, like I said, with everything I talked about in the other interview, with no medicine and, you know, I mean, training from just another individual. I mean, I'm not no vet tech. I mean, you know, I wouldn't let somebody operate on my dog that was operating on a pig, but I mean, like, you know, that's what's going on basically.
Absolutely. And it's, yeah, you're so right about, it's getting that information out there. You know, it's not, people aren't going to seek out slaughterhouses or factory farms, you know, most people to go and see what happens in them. So by doing that and bringing the information to the people, like you say, it's so powerful. It's like, this is where your meat comes from.
Yeah.
One of the, yeah, you know, one of the things that you were saying, that, you know, a lot of cannibalism goes on in you know, with the piglets and the pigs, and you know, how people don't know when they're buying you know, a roast pork from the supermarket, maybe that pig ate another pig. You just, you know, it's like, oh god.
I know, and it's crazy to think that. And you know, the many times that, you know, you come in on the weekend, they always pick on the weak one. I mean, we look at any situation and any kind of, you know, it's always like a pecking order. You know, even with chickens, they always go after the weaker one sometimes. And you know, animals can be cruel, but I mean, these are animals. I mean, they do their thing. And especially when they're in these positions where, you know, they have no room to run around, they don't have any toys, no stimulation, no nothing. Like, you know, now with adopting a mini pig and giving them a place to live and stay and seeing the happy environment, and like, it was really hard the first month with him because I never saw that kind of engagement with a pig before, and to see, you know, how happy they can be just rolling around in grass and playing in dirt, you know, simple things that, you know, they're so deprived from, and or even chewing on tree branches, his new favorite thing. You know, like this, it's like such a cross between animals with them, and to see their own personality and to see how deprived they were in the barns, and that's why they're picking on each other, because there's nothing for them to do. I mean, and we even knew it in the barns too, and we would throw basketballs in the pens with them. They had chains sometimes hanging. You know, to try and occupy them in the finisher barn so they're not cannibalizing. But I mean, just because we know they're doing it, I mean, that doesn't make it right. I mean, we should, you know, I mean, giving them more room is not going to help. We just, now that we know we don't need to be doing this, there's no reason to. So, I mean, it's just crazy, you know, when we know, like you said, that these animals could have eaten another animal and then the animal.
And the whole thing about when you were talking about cutting off their teeth and the tails, which, you know, we'll talk about, but you know, the whole reason that you guys even had to do that was because we created that, because, you know, so that they don't get bored and they don't attack each other. You cut the tails off so that, you know, they can't chew on them because they're bored, and they can't damage each other if you cut their teeth. So it's like, you've got to do these horrible jobs, which, you know, our demand as humans created because we insist on keeping them in these horrible conditions. It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the genetics too. I mean, we've bred these pigs to grow the fastest and keep them short. And we've made these pigs now genetically in the last 15 years, you know, to suit our needs too. Like, they've taken all these different breeds to create a new breed just to suit their demand of what they're looking for too, and make it more convenient for shipping and hauling and growing, right? You know, it's just like what they did with chickens, you know, in the 50s to make broilers. They've done with pigs now too. And it's crazy, right? Like, it's
yeah. It was interesting. I listened to a TED talk about addiction at one stage, and they did a study with rats, and it was water with cocaine in it, and they give the rat an empty cage on his own, and they give him this water and normal water, and of course it just goes for the drug fueled water until it kills itself. And then in another cage they gave the rats, you know, as many toys as they could need. You know, they had friends in there, they had all the food they could want. They basically gave them a perfect habitat, and then the same water bottles, and they didn't touch the cocaine spiked water. You know, they just went for the natural thing. And that's the thing, when we create these systems, you know, what else do we expect them to do but, you know, self-destruct within them? And yeah, it's so sad to see. But we touched on this, I guess, briefly earlier. You know, a big part of the appeal for you as a teenager, you know, when you got into farming, was the size of the paycheck. In hindsight, do you believe the wage ever met the sort of the work requirements?
No, because as I got into it more and more and traveled through farming, I found out that you never were able to get your actual overtime. So anything after 8 hours was just straight time. And it was, so in the end, it never ended up panning out in the end. I mean, the one job that did, the salary job I was in, the boar stud, that was okay. But I mean, that job is just mentally not fun to do. And that could have changed too as the company grew, because I was with the company when it was still relatively small, and now it's this gigantic corporation. So, I mean, that probably wouldn't have lasted anyways. And so, no, I don't think the pay matched what the workload was, because it was one of the heaviest workloads you had. Like, you're always moving, you're rushing through your breaks. And like I said, you're given, 10 hours, you're working 2 hours already overtime that is not paid overtime. So, I mean, you're only given 10 hours to do a job that sometimes could take even more if you actually, and I think too, if we were actually given more time and paid well, maybe you would take your time and maybe things wouldn't get so out of hand sometimes. But cruelty is still cruelty. I mean, you're cutting tails off and clipping teeth. So, I mean, it doesn't matter in the end, right? I mean, it's still cruelty. So, I mean, there's no good way to do the job. And, when we have so many better ways we can, make money off agriculture, growing plants that we eat.
Yeah.
And you can get more plants per acre than you do with meats. It's, a no-brainer almost, right? So, I mean, I don't think the wage was ever right for the amount of work and what it put us through too, right? Because you're often in such a stressful situation. And, I wouldn't say it taught me, but it encouraged you to be more physical and pushy with animals, right? And treat them more like a product and not really like a person, right? And that carries on into everyday life too, right? I mean, if you don't respect animals, how are you supposed to respect humans? I mean, I don't see how you can't have one without the other. If you can't respect one, we're all animals. You can't respect your animals, you're never going to respect each other. I think that goes along with everything that's going on. I mean, we need to respect each other at all animals, we're all sentient earth creatures, right? And,
True.
need to, get along.
No, that really brings things back for me. Like I was being and working on dairy farms for years in a previous life, and when we talk about, vegans versus farmers, and farmers are so hardworking, and it's like, we know, farming is really, really hard work, and it's not fun work. It can be very stressful work, but having spent years doing that, I fully understand what it's like being part of that system, and also sort of focusing on doing a good job without fully realizing what that job actually is. So, we become so indoctrinated in that this is the way things are and this is what we do. So looking back now, when I was farming, I took huge pride in the fact that, I was like 50 kilos, 5 foot nothing, and I could milk 220 cows by myself. And I could carve a cow by myself. That was like huge, big proud thing for me. So, now I'm like, wow. But at the time, I really prided myself on doing my job well, and like you say, often in stressful situations, but as doing a good job as you could do. Was it the same for you, being, trying to be skilled in the tasks which were asked of you as well?
Definitely. I was always raised to do my grandma always told me, if you're going to do something, do it right, do it the best way you always can, and, put all your effort into it. So, I mean, I always learned everything I could from the people. I always tried to make, you're always told to make the barn owner as much money as possible, and you always want to do good for the owner, right? And so I did that. And I mean, I achieved, in Manitoba, I beat the born alive record for piglets in a sow. So she had 24 born alive piglets and 21 survived to go on to slaughter. So it was a record that was never beaten in Manitoba, and the average was 11 and a half. So the Manitoba Pork Company, they actually bought us pizza, they brought us bar, they rewarded the whole barn for my hard work, I mean, to encourage me to do a better job at doing this to the animals, right? And, so yeah, I mean, I took my pride in my work and tried to do it to the best of my ability. Even the person that took over my job after, he didn't know how I did what I did. And, he was really blown away, because I kept in touch with a few people for a little while. I mean, that's all those connections are gone now, but I mean, that was a lot, like you said, a lifetime ago. Yeah, I mean, I always did the best I could, and I do the same thing with bricklaying, right? I mean, you have to. I mean, you have to do the best you can, otherwise you'll be out the door, and there's a guy to replace you, and you got to be fast and you got to be accurate, and that's I think that that gave me good work ethic too, being in farming, because it does. I mean, you have a list, and you're oftentimes you're not managed by anybody. You have to pick your tasks, get them done, and you have to do it on your own. I mean, it was 2 guys in charge of 1,000 animals. So, I mean, you have your two job, you have your list and he's got his list. And if something happens, you get help and, that's it. And so I think that led me into good construction etiquette and being such a good construction worker too, as I, really achieved great things and worked really hard and, especially with bricklaying and, graduating all my school really quickly and, it was, led me into good things. So, I mean, it does give you good ethic. There's good farming out there too, that you don't have to do animal farming. So, it's never about being hard on the farmers. And I sometimes I think that gets lost in the message.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So there's a systematic problem, not an individual problem for the most part. But yeah, as we've touched on this earlier, with the Animal Voices Vancouver interview that you did, it was really quite shocking, especially for me, because myself, I don't have a farming background, but hearing you talking about, things you asked to do as a teenager, which was, as you said, castrating 2-day-old piglets, cutting off their teeth and tails, assisting sows in giving birth, all of this without, pain medication and stuff like that for the animals. As time's gone on, there's more people like yourself who are speaking out about the welfare issues. And that's not just for the animals, because we're all becoming very aware now of just how inherently cruel these industries are, but also for the workers. And, I guess were you put under a lot of pressure? You either do the job or you don't have a job. It's either you do these acts or you're gone.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're not willing to do the job, then you're of no use to the work or the barn, right? I think it's really important. It is really important, to do your job, and otherwise you're gone. And that's with most jobs nowadays. I mean, if you can't perform, then there's someone to replace you. So I mean, there's always that kind of pressure. Yeah, that's my dog Sky.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Got lonely. Yeah, she's a rescue we got shortly after my car accident. I saw her it was weird, we weren't looking for a dog, but for some reason I saw her online and I went and looked at her and she was the only dog that wasn't barking, and I ended up coming home with her. So it was kind of
she's beautiful.
Yeah, she's pretty awesome.
Thank you for coming to say hello.
Yeah.
We were just wondering, actually, another question meant to ask is, you're saying that there weren't too many other work opportunities in Manitoba, being such a rural area. Is there a high staff sort of turnover with these kind of things? Because I know in dairy farming, it was kind of like over here, it's like survival of the fittest, who's tough enough to stick it out kind of thing. If you don't stick it out, you're a wuss, you're a wimp. So there's that kind of staunchness as well, so just wondering, with the kind of work that you had to do, was there a high turnover of workers? And
I think there is now. Back when I was younger, it was more people that were local working in these farms. But now I feel that even when I was there, I saw it turning more into bringing people in from other countries to work in our barns as foreign workers, and giving them job opportunities to bring their families over to work in barns too. I think that's a problem we're starting to see more in Canada, because they're realizing more locals aren't willing to work in these positions because of the conditions of the barns. I mean, that's my personal feeling with what I saw with when the companies I worked at turned more corporate. They had more money and they can bring people in from other countries where they're already working to bring their stuff over. It's something that I think is a bigger problem. And even doing our vigils and stuff, none of them people are local. When we try to talk to them, they're not, they don't speak English very well. So we know that, they're not, generally from around here. And I feel like we're taking advantage of these people, bringing them from, a impoverished area, and then giving them a job in Canada, but giving them a job in the worst possible condition. So it's something that I think is more of a problem here that I'm starting to see with jobs that people aren't willing to do. They just, bring people that are going to be willing. And, once they have you like that, and then they offer you these incentives, to bring family over to work in the barns, I think it's kind of, not really right.
No, you're right.
So, I mean, that's what I've seen here.
Yeah, that makes sense actually. Like when I first got into farming, it was the early 90s. And that was, it was quite a prestigious thing to do. It was, you're a good salt of the earth person. That's what you get into. That's what all the young people were doing. And, because you could climb the ladder, there was a lot of money in it, and it was a good, wholesome, honest job kind of thing. And now, society's changed a lot about youth, and attitudes have changed. And so, there was a while there that, the farming, they were going out really hard advertising, because young people today, they were like, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning, having no weekends, having no holidays or time off. I mean, my 20s were just gone, they were gone in a blur, and they were gone in the cowshed somewhere, I never get those years back, so it's certainly changed, and the same, we have the same issues here, just trying to get people who will do the job, and good, reliable workers, because people don't want to do that stuff anymore.
No, the young people, they'll try it for a little while and be like, why am I doing this? Even when I was working, we would bring in young kids to watch, try and get them, and they don't want to be there. It smells, they'd rather be on their computer doing something with computers, right? I mean, the push is so computerized nowadays. Why would they want to be in a smelly barn with animals? And, that's what I found too. I mean, no youth wanted to get involved. I mean, the farmer's son didn't want anything to do with it. That would come help out a little bit. And I think that was just more of a common thing we're starting to see, because there's just so many other opportunities, that for the people, right? And I think that's why they end up taking advantage of these other, communities and people. And it's not right.
I always find it quite ironic as well, and how, that problem is, it's global, everywhere we have this idea, though, that there's always such a patriotic industry, the animal agriculture and stuff like that, we're feeding the country, and we're employing our own, but for the most part, that's not really true now. We're sending the best stuff overseas. We're having the folks from overseas come and work, which is fair enough, but we're putting them into those hellish conditions, and it's quite ironic.
You see Bubba there?
Oh, hey, Bubba.
Came for a little show.
Oh, look at that waggy tail.
Sorry to interrupt, but I thought I'd show you.
Oh, no, we love interruptions like that.
So you've mentioned during your years at the hog farm, there are times that you thought, like this isn't right, it just there's something wrong about some of the actions that you're doing. Did you ever talk to some of your other co-workers about that? And was there actually any support given by like the barns and stuff like that for mental health?
No, there was nothing talked about with mental health for workers, or any kind of talk about what we were dealing with, even like, killing pigs, all the different ways that I've talked about in killing them. I mean, I've learned more now with going to PTSD groups for my car accident. A lot of what I experienced, is trauma. And it's something that I do deal with, and I need to talk about it more to share my experience. It's something that I've really learned. It's like your bookshelf or scratching off the wound. It kind of heals every time you scratch it off. And it's something I've learned with going to PTSD and stuff like that. Because killing animals for needless ways, it is something that will bug you, and it does bug me. And it took me a really long time to get used to Bubba, seeing him in a happy place. The first kind of couple nights was kind of sad, because I was just like, what was I doing, seeing how happy he was, especially because he was only 6 months old when we got him, so he's still pretty small. And he's grown a little bit since then. And
just a bit.
Yeah, just a bit. So he's a little bit smaller than this guy. And so to see him in a happy environment, see his personality and all the different, sounds he makes, and how everything's kind of a conversation with him, and you don't even know it. It's fun. It's something else.
It's awesome. Oh, it's great that you found support in other ways, because we were talking about that, weren't we? If you're in the police and you witness something traumatic, or you have to do something traumatic, or if you're in the fire service or something, you get offered counseling and all this. Like there's nothing like that I know
car
about.
Accidents, right? Even car accidents, you're generally offered some counseling to deal with, especially traumatic ones, right? Where it comes out of nowhere and gets you. You know, and then that's, you know, in talking about is kind of when you find out these other things too, that they're up there too, right?
Yeah.
Especially a few of the other things I dealt with. I, you know, some of the encounters I had with police and some of my youth too. I mean, those are definitely things that I'll always remember and stick with me as well. But yeah, I mean, once you learn about PTSD and how any, you know, trauma is trauma, but, you know, as you build trauma over a lifetime, it's like a bookshelf, and eventually that bookshelf can get full, and then your bookshelf can fall over. So, I mean, you know, adding farming and everything else, it can all get to you, right? And then all it can take is one thing that can help you remember, and then you can, you know, kind of have a breakdown. So yeah, it is important that there's something for workers. I mean, you know, they don't even realize, especially the ones that we're bringing over from other countries. We're not, you know, we know this as people living here and have done it, but, you know, we know this now, but we're still bringing people over and we don't tell them, you know, there's nothing for them. And I don't know if it's starting to change, but I doubt it. I mean, there's some unionized slaughter workers and stuff that you hear about, but I don't know if that helps anything. I mean, in the end, I mean, murder is murder, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So hopefully one day, but I mean, even with all my years in farming, you know, I was flabbergasted to hear some of the things that you've spoken out about that go on in pig operations. And you know, one such example, and I mean, God, I dealt with things with cows as well, so we can definitely draw comparisons. We can have all kinds of horror stories between us, but one of the ones that
I got into cow farming, I didn't want to ruin milk for myself.
I was lactose intolerant, you see, and I think that's why it took me so long to make the connection. I was always vegetarian, but I was severely intolerant to dairy products. So, you know,
I loved chocolate milk growing up, so I really never wanted to learn about where my came from. And then, like, you know, once I was vegan and found out, I was like, that was the easiest thing for me to stop, because I was like, what? Like, I was like, okay, like, it's like, for me, it was like, watched What the Health the next day, like, no more animal products for me. You know, for everybody in my house, it took a little bit longer, but for me, I was dead set, because I was like, what are we doing here? I mean, especially, like, you know, all of that, right? When you start, like, finding it out, it's just like, how much is in what and what? Like,
exactly.
you know, like,
and having done that and put all those antibiotics and medicines and chemicals and things into, you know,
being a farmer, I knew what I was reading wasn't lies. You know what I mean? Like, I doing what I did with pigs, I knew that there's no way this could be false too. I mean, if what I'm reading is about pigs is true and I did it, then this has to be true too. So
yeah. Absolutely, I get that. And you know, like, how do people react to you when they hear this kind of information from someone who has actually experienced it and said, you know, that's not actually rubbish what they're saying on What the Health, or no, that's not crap what you see on the internet, this is what happens?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It usually leads to a pretty good conversation. Like, with the general public, like, it's a good conversation, because it can really open their eyes that they don't realize that everybody thinks it happens, animal cruelty or these practices, but they don't realize it happens here, like, in their own province. For some reason, they think their province is different all the time. You know, it's kind of weird, the disconnect. Oh, well, it doesn't happen here. And, well, yeah, it does. I mean, I did it. I mean, I can relate to it. I mean, I can explain it to you, like, word for word what we were doing. And I think that at that point is when they really start listening, because then they realize, you know, I do have the knowledge in it. And I'm not speaking, I'm speaking right from the heart when I'm doing it. Like, it's not even something I have to think about. It's like you said, it was my day in, day out routine. Like, it was engraved in me. Like, you know, you turn on the lights, make sure everybody was up, you know, it was engraved into me. So for me, it's just like a routine to speak on, that I did for, you know, 4 years straight. So yeah, and then farmers, it's fun to talk to too, because, like, I call it fun, because they want to say, well, I don't do it like that. Okay, what kind of hog farm do you work at, or what kind of pig farm do you work at? And then they say this kind, and I'm like, okay, so this would be your daily tasks. And then they look at me like, because, you know, like, yeah, I did a Cubic Truth, Cubic Truth in our town here, in Steinbach here, and like, the farmer came up from the same company I worked at, and he was like, it doesn't happen like this. I'm like, well, where do you work? Oh, I work over at this barn. I worked at that same barn, actually. So I was like, oh, well, this is what happens here, and like this, and, you know, every weekend you have how many that pass away and die, or we have to kill and pick up from the things. He's like, yeah. He's like, I can't argue with you. And he just walked away. And he ended up saying, having my daughter at the Cube of Truth was cruelty. Or child abuse. Sorry, child abuse. I was just like, oh really? You know, I was like, well, she's on her free will, and she can tell you about animals.
How dare you tell her the truth about where meat comes from and make her compassionate? Oh God.
Yeah. So I mean, I enjoy having the farmer conversation because it can be more of an educated conversation. Even on my YouTube channel too, we had a really good conversation out at a farm where we followed a truck to, and same kind of thing. So it's enjoyable to share my experience and like to help maybe open their eyes and get them thinking too about what they're doing.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. It's really good. And I mean, I know the very first piece of activism that I did was a video for SAFE. And knowing what farmers are like over here, I was so scared, you know, because there's little me, you know, and these big gruff farmers. And, you know, it is over here, it's just massive, massive industry like it is for you over there. And I was really, really scared. I was so scared, in fact, that I made them distort my voice and blur out my face, and all I was doing was speaking the truth about, you know, that cows and calves get separated and this is what happens. And, you know, I was the one that would drive the motorbike, you know, while all this was going on around me. You know, I was only speaking the truth, but you know, even just doing that, there were still graphic threats of violence and all sorts made against me. So, you know, speaking out against a violent system can invoke a violent response. Was there an elephant? Got animals on the brain. Was there even an element of fear for you when first speaking out? Hopefully no elephants, but...
Not here in Canada. I wasn't too worried about it. I mean, you know, we live in a day and age where we have technology on our side. I mean, we have cameras everywhere nowadays. We have recorders everywhere. I mean, you basically can catch any moment on camera, or at least record it somehow in some instance, you know, voice recording. So, I mean, I've never been too worried. You know, I grew up with troubled youth too. So, I mean, had my share of fights growing up. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I don't want to fight anymore. I don't enjoy fighting. I mean, I definitely don't encourage fighting in any sort of way, but I mean, like, I can protect myself and my family. And, you know, I mean, I don't think it's ever came to, it's weird because I don't know if it's because I'm a guy. I mean, I don't get too much banter back. I mean, I don't know if it's the way I give my message. I mean, I'm not hopefully encouraging people to start attacking me, but I mean, like, I haven't ever really encouraged that or had that happen so much right now. I mean, even on our Facebook or our YouTubes, I mean, I don't really see too much of that. I mean, what I speak is just so accurate to what I went through. I mean, it's hard to really argue it in any sort of the way. I mean, you're just agreeing with it with arguing it almost. I mean, can't really argue with what's going on with these industries. It's pretty black and white. I mean,
exactly. and we're not sort of saying, you know, all farmers are horrible people, because it's not the case, you know.
Yeah, exactly, because that's something I do speak on. I mean, I speak on other options for farmers, and I do speak on that because, I mean, I see a pig farm as so many opportunities. I mean, it's got sewer, it's got water, it's got electricity. I mean, we're going into a time and age where, you know, outdoor agriculture is really suffering in some instances, whether it's, you know, I mean, here in Canada, we have a lot colder weather and more rain right now. We have lots of flooding right now. And then we have these barns where we have thousands of animals and square footage of space that we could be using to grow agriculture inside inside a barn, right? And hydroponic systems or anything, right? So and I think that's something that is feasible, right? Because you have everything you need inside a barn to do. I mean, we have I've read a few things where they've put chicken farms into hemp farms. Same principle, right? You have water, you have electricity, you have an enclosed space, or they can turn them into mushroom farms. So, I mean, we can take these buildings that have already have every essential for growing things and use it for something. And I do speak on that, as I do do home agriculture, and I've been learning a lot about permaculture and hydroponics and growing systems. I have a big hydroponic tower sitting here for growing lettuces. Big tower garden, so that's what this big bright light is.
Awesome.
And so I mean, we have so many different things we can do where farmers can make money that don't have violence involved. you could go to work and have a happy day trimming plants and, picking up the clippings and sweeping and like making sure everybody has water and the pH of the water is good. Like, you can do a day of peaceful farming where you'd actually like go home feeling good. I mean, there's nothing better than going into the garden and working in a garden. And if every farmer could experience that instead of pushing animals around and mutilating them and doing all these things to them, I think it's been proven too, there's more money involved in some of these other farming systems than animal agriculture, as most of it has subsidies. If we take the subsidies away, meat would be so expensive the average person would never want to purchase it, and they'd purchase the plant-based meat anyways. So in the end, we're going to end up there anyways, because, eventually who knows what'll happen. But if this farmer can't get subsidies, the meat price is going to go double, right? And, I think in the end, that's the answer, right? We have all this space, and then you got to think about all the land that's used to feed the animals. Like, especially in Canada, most of our agricultural land is fed to the animals. So, we're wasting so much on, double feeding. We're feeding an animal to feed ourselves when we could just feed ourselves, and use these facilities, like I said, to grow high value protein year round. Because we all have winter, right? And if we have barns that have temperature and climate controlled and we use thermal mass, these facilities would be something that would work. And I don't know, I hope someone will eventually catch on to the idea and start doing it.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Like for me, I love it when people have the approach of presenting not just the problem but the solutions too. Because once again, here in New Zealand, we get asked a lot. Oh, what am I going to go do with those hills over there? Then and they always want to know exactly what they can do with their specific land. And yeah, it's I really hope more people are able to learn the same as you and what solutions we can give to people. But going back to, your work with doing the Cube of Truth and stuff. So you're an integral part with the vegan outreach in Manitoba. And
the other way, so it's not in my face. Sorry.
No worries.
The light was it's getting dark out now, so the light's getting really bright beside me.
No worries. But yeah, so how was it for you, like doing your first cube, so once you're fresh out of the industry and stuff like that, getting out into outreach?
Yeah, it was a lot of anxiety, really nervous. I still shake before a cube. You just get nervous. You don't know what the public's response is going to be at the start, right? It's kind of like a ooh kind of feeling. And then, you have your first conversation and it just starts flowing. And it's for me, it's just like, that approach of just letting people watch and seeing what their approach is and how they're feeling. And then, seeing like, have you seen this before? And how does this make you feel? And then, if they have questions about what they're seeing, and if it happens here, that's when I really start to go into kind of what I kind of experience. So, it kind of just flows for me when I have the conversation, but definitely before the cube, setting it up, we've had a lot of problem with security here and like harassment from people. That's why we ended up having to have body cameras and stuff so we could record security guards, because it adds an element of security for ourselves, and it really puts them on the spot when you have a camera on you recording the whole time and they're breaking your constitutional rights or your charter of rights to protest, right, in a public space. So, I think the starting of a cube, right, the first 10 minutes can be really exciting, and especially being the organizers too, because we're obviously, I don't know if it's not obvious, but we ended up starting the chapter here in Winnipeg and being the organizers too. So that puts a lot of pressure being the organizers and starting in a farming community and, getting it going, right? And then, like I said, with some of the pushback from security, it can always get you, to try and keep things in a calm. And I think that's where my background kind of with the police as a youth, knowing what they don't like, kind of helps me, because I know what they do like now and how to talk to them so that they are respectful to me. And I know what is over the line for them too. So I think having that experience can really help too. But yeah, those first 10 minutes can be really tough and it can be really jittery. But like the end of the cube is like the most amazing feeling. And then like it's like trying to sleep that night is so hard because you're all so excited, especially if you have good conversations. We've had a couple of good cubes where it's just been, at different events where just one of those nights is just amazing, right? And, you just be, high on the excitement of, talking to so many people and sharing your story and having positive conversations, whether or not people are going to go vegan or not, you're still planting seeds. And I think that's really important to, get them to the level of maybe someday getting there. You might not be the first 20, there's like 100% you're vegan, you might just get them 10% the way there. I mean, but somebody else might get them 20% more, and then they might see something on social media, and before you know it, they're vegan, right? Or on their way to it. So I think it's really important, and it's nerve wracking. We're talking about starting our first cube right away, and I'm just like, woo! Everybody's all ready to go, and they've starting to open things up here now for, the public, somewhat pretty limited, but still enough that I think we could do it. And yeah, we're kind of excited too, because we haven't done one in, since the summer last year, or November. So yeah, it'll be fun. But yeah, the first 10 minutes is
That's awesome. Well, it's great to hear that from you, especially, I haven't done one yet. And, it's something that we, the more we're learning from activists like yourself, we're like, yeah, we got to do this, like before it was like, yeah, we want to do this somewhere along the line. But now we're like, no, we really want to do this. This is really important that we do this. And I think, it's brilliant to get this awareness out there and answer all those questions about things like security, safety. Like every activist that we speak to is different. In LA, they've got things pretty sus. They have a great relationship with the police. Then you go to the UK or here in New Zealand, and you never know what you're going to get, so
same thing in Canada. It's like, woo, you never know, you'll get some power tripping security guard, and then he can talk the police into something, and then all of a sudden you get the police apologizing to you after, which I've had. And it's crazy. I mean, we had an NHL game playing, and we were doing our Cube of Truth outside an NHL hockey game. And because they had the cameras outside, they were really pushing us around because they didn't want us on national TV. And that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to get on national TV, trying to like make a little bit of a scene. But I mean, they use their authority, and, having cameras, it can really help you. And, having I always carry our Charter of Rights in Canada too, and flash that in their face. And, you have your right. I mean, it's public space, right? So, I mean, if we have the right, we should try to use it when we can, and hopefully they'll respect our rights and do the best. And as long as you're always respectful and not swearing, I find is always important. I mean, you got to be professional. You're wearing a logo of an organization, and you're representing them, so you have to treat it like that. Like that's important to me. I mean, I treat it the same way as I would go to work bricklaying, right? I'm representing whoever I'm working for. So I mean, you have to bring it with a certain approach of professionalism, but sassiness too, that you're not getting pushed around.
Yeah.
And it can be. And I was gonna say, as you were a farmer too, it's a rewarding experience having that conversation with somebody, explaining your story, especially on the street with somebody who has no clue who you are, who's never met you before, and they don't have any, they just think you're just some random activist or whatever. But like, you end up coming with such a story that's compelling, and it can really really get people thinking about what they're doing. And I think for you, it'll be really fun when you get to try it.
I must do it. Yeah, I get what you mean. It adds a whole other dimension. And I know for me, once I stepped away from the industry and I saw it for what it is, there were always things like you that I didn't like, but when the bombshell dropped and I saw everything as a whole and everything that I'd been part of, I found it really, really hard to live with myself for having once been part. I still do, and I don't know if that guilt will ever go away, but I guess what I learned from another activist, Jessica Strathsey over here, she's a fantastic anti-dairy activist. And she said, our way of coping with it is by using our years of knowledge and experience to now speak out against that and tell people what's going on. So I guess for me, I can't ever make up for it, but it's a kind of atonement for me for the suffering that I had a part in, that I helped to cause. I wonder if that's the same for you at all. Would you say that, you get that kind of feeling from it as well?
Definitely. Every talk I give in front of the public, so I try to give public talks about my experiences. I have like a PowerPoint I do, and anytime I do that, I think it's like like you say, atonement, or just like just kind of gives a little bit back to the animals that I put away and stuff like that, and did the things that I did too. It's just like it's I think of Bubba every time, right? Every time we do a cube, it's like he's the one guy who gets to live out his life when I put so many to the rest, right? And especially for needless things too. And every farm did different things because they had different standards. You had to do what that boss told you to do, whether I thought it was right or not. I mean, if I wanted to continue working there, if he said to do that to the pig, I mean, that was what I had to do, right? And like now when I can share that story with them, that's like sharing his story, that of what I did to him. It's kind of like giving back to him. That's kind of how I feel. I mean, that's because in pig farming there's so much death. I mean, we're constantly killing animals. Like there's always small ones. I mean, I never worked with cows, but I mean, pigs having 11 and a half to 12 piglets a litter. I mean, you can imagine, there's a lot of death involved in that, and all the way into the end of, finishing. So it can be, in especially different ways. So.
Wonderful.
It's certainly making a difference now, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's what it's about, sharing the story and then helping give back to the other animals, right? And if we can, I know it's, some people say, what are you doing, like trying to get one consumer at a time, but I mean, if that one person stops eating animals, that's 3 meals a day, you know what I mean? And that person can get maybe 1 or 2 people. I mean, I know it's not changing the whole world, but I mean, it's a slow start, and it's, I think, I mean, it works, right? I mean, it's the easiest thing we can do. We all know how hard it is to change government policy, and, animal rights organizations aren't the Cattlemen's Association and these big, huge organizations who can throw money at government to tell them what to do, right? We're the ants, and, the only thing the ants can do is tell the other person to stop doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And every one person, that's still 365 animals a year, isn't it? Roughly that,
exactly. And that person might get 2 or 3 person in a year. They could share the story, or they might have kids, and then they're not going to want their kids to start out eating animals, and let them make that decision as they're older, and if they decide they want to go that route and whatever. I mean, I can't stop them when they're adults, but I mean, I'm going to give you the best plant-based meal I can give you now because I have 2 children, and, that's what we do, right? And the amount of health things we saw change in my daughter going vegan was amazing, right? I mean, she suffered from a lot of different things, asthma, stomach problems, eczema, and all that's gone away just by changing a diet. And same with my asthma too. My asthma is not gone, but I mean, it's definitely better than it ever was in my whole life, just by not consuming dairy, like really, and animal products, like it's wow.
Yeah, definitely. I can vouch for the asthma too, and migraines stopped day one. Who knew? I thought it was part of my job was migraines.
No. Yeah.
So for those who want to support you and keep up to date with what you're doing with the activism, stuff like that, is there any place that you can go to follow you, or anywhere else you can recommend they check out?
Yeah, so I have on YouTube, I have a YouTube channel called Canadian Vegan Outreach. So that's my YouTube channel. And then I have a Patreon, Vegan Justin. And then my Instagram is Justin204 Vegan.
So, well, thank you so much for giving up your evening to come and speak to us today, and Bubba too, and all the family.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. And it was really great to share my story with you guys and everybody else. And I hope I can really help other farmers or other activists, by helping them with their activism, or help other farmers realize they don't need to continue doing it. And, there are other people who did it that, aren't doing it anymore.
Thank you for watching this episode. If you would like to support our speaker, then follow the links provided in the description. If you're enjoying this content, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave a like on some of our videos and drop some comments with the things that you've been learning from this series. We really appreciate all your love and support, and we can't wait to bring you the next episode. Thank you.